Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are following us. Welcome back to the Extending Social Protection to Migrant Workers, a South-South virtual conference. We are very happy you could join us again and continue to engage on this very important topic. My name is Victoire Umuhire. I am a Social Protection and Labor Migration Officer at the International Labor Office based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. This virtual conference is brought to you by the ILO and the AUC with the support from socialprotection.org platform. It's made possible through the financial support from the EU through the International Center on Migration Policy Development, ICMPD, which funds the ILO project on extending social protection, access, and portability of benefits to migrant workers and their families in selected regional economic communities in Africa. Yesterday, we had the honor and pleasure to hear from distinguished guests from the AUC, from government, workers, and employers representative on practical ways they are working together to design policies and strategies to extend social protection to migrant workers. We heard of the challenges they faced in the implementation of these policies and strategies, particularly in this difficult time we are facing of COVID-19 pandemic. One takeaway was the importance to involve actors from the world of work, in particular, representatives of workers and employers and businesses to find innovative solutions that they can implement together. Social dialogue is thus key to successful extension of strategies at all levels, from the continental level to the national level. Today, we continue the discussions with technical panels from experts in both social protection and migration. These panelists are actors at country level, regional, and also international level. They will share experiences, good practices, and thoughts on effective policies and strategies that seek to design and implement social protection systems that are responsive to shocks and crises such as the ongoing COVID-19. Today, we have two moderators for each panel. The first panel, piecing the building blocks, regional frameworks, and approaches for extending social protection to migrant workers, challenges, opportunities, and adapting policies in times of crisis, will be moderated by my colleague, Dramane Bachabi. Mr. Bachabi is a social protection specialist at the ILO Office for Central Africa based in Yaoundé, Cameroon since 2015. As part of his function, he has notably supported several countries in the development of national social protection policies, the design of programs and mechanisms for the extension of social protection, as well as capacity building of several actors. Mr. Bachabi, a very warm welcome to you. The second panel will be on good practices in extending social protection to migrant workers through social security and labor agreements in Africa and beyond, will be moderated by my colleague, Ms. Gloria Moreno Fontes. Ms. Moreno Fontes is the ILO Africa Regional Labor Migration and Mobility Specialist. She is currently coordinating the implementation of ILO's labor migration and refugee responses in Africa. A very welcome to you as well, Ms. Moreno Fontes. After the two panel discussions, we will have the pleasure to welcome back Ms. Nozipo Shabalala, who moderated yesterday's high-level panel. She will facilitate the conclusion and closing remarks of this virtual conference from our social partners. We are very grateful that you chose to be with us today. We know that there's a lot of demand on your time at this particular moment, and we hope the conversation from both yesterday and today will inspire action towards effective extension of social protection to migrant workers and their families. Without further ado, Mr. Bachabi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Victoire, for giving me the floor. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this panel, which will focus on piecing the building block, regional, sub-regional framework and approach for extending social protection to migrant workers, challenges, and opportunities and adapting policies in time of crisis. My name is Draman Bachabi. I am ILO social protection specialist, and it is a great honor for me to facilitate this panel. Let me please start by introducing our panelists. Today we will have 6 panelists, and I hope that all of them will be able to join us for this session. So the first panelist I will introduce to you is Mr. Andrew Aliu. He is a senior social protection specialist at ILO office in Pretoria. And prior to this position, Andrew was a chief technical advisor for the ILO ICMPD project, extending access to social protection and portability of benefits to migrant workers and their families in Africa. His experiences in the UN system include UN Economic Commission to Africa, and he also worked for UNICEF Regional Office. He was, prior to this position, at national level, the head of the Actuarial and Planning Department at the National Social Security Fund of Sierra Leone. Welcome, Andrew. The second panelist I will introduce to you is Mr. Cheikh Tidiane Tounkara. He is from Senegal and is currently the president of the Commission of CIPRES. CIPRES is a Francophone African Association for Social Security Institution. Mr. Tounkara has a master in international law and a diploma from the Centre National d'Études Supérieures de CESAC of Saint-Étienne. He is the former technical director and former secretary general of the Social Security Fund of Senegal, former social protection technical advisor to the Prime Minister of Senegal, and former CIPRES inspector 9 years, and is currently the president of the CIPRES Supervisory Commission, as I just said, since 2016. The third panelist is Mr. Jean-Jacques Samba. He is the advisor to the president of the employer organization in Congo. Mr. Jean-Jacques Samba is a Congolese national. He studies business in Algeria and has worked at the Ministry of Commerce from 1977 to 1999. He worked as a Secretary General for the Union Patronale of and Interprofessional of Congo from 2000 to 2015 and remained as this organization representative at the International Organization of Employers since 15 years. Mr. Maxel Parakowa is a senior program officer, employment, labor, and youth. He is currently Directorate of Social and Human Development in SADC Secretary. And the last one is Mr. Nyasa Muchi Chua, is economist, researcher. Mr. Nyasa is an economist with the Labor and Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe. He holds an executive master in labor economics, applying labor economics for development from the Sciences Po France, and a master's in applying labor economics for development from the University of Turin. He is specialized in employment, youth development, decent work, collective bargaining, and the informal economy. He is a member of the Collective Bargaining Support for Africa Initiative. And Mr. Peter Aibor is the General Manager of the Social Security and National Insurance Trust of Ghana. Peter joined the Social Security and National Insurance Trust of Ghana from private practice as a legal officer, rose to become General Manager, Special Project and Social Security Regulatory Matters. He played a major role in pension reform in Ghana. He holds a Bachelor of Law degree and an MBA in financial management, among other professional qualifications. So these are our panelists for this session. So I would like you to welcome them. And we will just start the session. And I will invite Mr. Maxwell from SADC to answer the first question. Mr. Maxwell, SADC has developed a number of frameworks extending social protection to migrant workers, including SADC portability of accrued social security benefit policy framework in 2016, and the SADC labor migration policy framework, to name a few. In March 2022, SADC Employment and Labor Sector Minister and Social Partner adopt the guideline on the portability of social security benefits in SADC. So these are some key achievements regarding SADC work on extension of social protection. So Mr. Maxwell, can you share the process that led to the development of this instrument? What were the main challenges, experiences in the negotiation process? And what step has the Secretary taken to start the implementation of this guideline? So Mr. Maxwell, please, you have maximum 5 minutes for this question. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and greetings to everyone else that is joining us. In terms of process, we have in the Southern African Development Community, which we usually call SADC or SADC, we have a formalized platform which is called the Employment and Labor Sector. This is a tripartite sector that brings together the governments in the region, across the 16 member states, together with the social partners through their representatives. We work closely with the SADC Private Sector Forum, representing the employers. We also work with the SATUC, which represents the workers in the region. So within the formalized structure or the organized structure of the SADC Employment and Labor Sector, in the last 2 years, we were able to bring together every other player, including the social security experts, to negotiate these guidelines, which we now have. So the process was tripartite in nature, but the process doesn't just start 2 years ago with the project, which the ILO has been technically backstopping. This process started quite some time ago. In 2003, the member states already adopted the SADC Charter on Fundamental Social Rights in SADC. That charter already included cooperation on social security. Then in 2007, the member states moved another step to now have a clear instrument on social security now. And in that framework, the member states now identified the right for migrant workers to access social security, including also portability. Then a few years down the line, in 2016, the member states now adopted a more focused policy instrument on portability of social security benefits. But this was more a policy document signaling the intention to collaborate on portability. We then moved to 2018, thereabouts, the 2 years between 2018 and now. The member states now moved further to now develop a more comprehensive instrument on portability of social security benefits. This is what we now have. And this is what has gone through the process which I just explained of tripartite consulting. It's involved everybody, the governments and the member states, especially with the social security experts. This is the process that we have put in place and that we have gone through. And now we now have the comprehensive and the practical guidelines for member states to use. In terms of the challenges, I think I would say the process, in terms of managing the process itself, I think I would say it was fairly smooth. There were no significant difficulties in terms of the process itself. The kind of challenges that you may want to talk about are challenges that may be related to implementation or the limitations that are imposed on the process of portability of social security benefits and so forth. And this is something that the member states, when they were negotiating, they particularly focused on. One of the key issues there is obviously the differences in the benefits that are being provided by the member states across the region, the 16 member states. The observation was that there is less convergence as we speak today, and there is great variability in terms of what schemes are available in the different member states. So in as much as we had wanted to go for an instrument that facilitates harmonization for social security system in the region, it became clear that perhaps what is more feasible at this stage is to facilitate coordination of social security and the institutions of social security in the region, as member states continue to take the steps to improve the schemes that are available, as well as the scope or the inclusiveness or the coverage of those schemes. So this is a challenge that will continue to be in place despite the guidelines. Member states still have to improve the number of schemes that are available, not only for the migrants, but also for the nationals. So this one key challenge, which we'll continue to focus on in implementation. The other one, which is worth mentioning, is the I think I would say the high incidence of irregular migration, especially, as you know, in the context of South-South cooperation. One of the key issues there is how can we extend social security or social security benefits to as many people as should be. And a key category there, when you talk of migrant workers, is the category of irregular. Is that the member states recognize that even if we have these guidelines in place, more work still needs to be done in the general context of migration itself to assure more fully the right to entry, the right to residence, the right to establishment, because it is only in this context that you will be able to reduce the drivers of irregular migration, so that when you have migrants in one country or another, the chances of them being in a regular position are higher, and therefore the chance to include them in these schemes, these guidelines, or whatever else you may have will be higher as well. So this is a challenge which requires the sector, the labor sector or the employment sector, to improve its working relationship, to improve its reach, to work across sectors so that generally the environment can be improved. So this is a challenge today, and it will continue, and it needs to be addressed. So just to close my opening there, what we now want to do, we have 5 member states that have already volunteered to pilot the guidelines that have been adopted, and I think these 5 countries are worth mentioning. This is Eswatini, Lesotho, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. So we're bringing these countries together, and this is planned for later this year, so that we can now see how can they take these guidelines from the regional level and domesticate them in their bilateral agreements, in their memorandum of understanding, so that they can begin to more practically address the issues of portability within binding frameworks, country to country, which can then also inform the municipal laws or the national laws. So this is a step that we're taking with the countries that have already expressed an interest to domesticate these guidelines. So this is where we have come from, and this is where we would immediately want to be taking the process further in terms of the next steps. Over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you very much, Mastuel, for this useful information. We can see that there are some progress regarding framework for extending social protection to migrant workers in SADC region. And there are some challenges, and I think we will discuss on these challenges during the question and answer section shortly. Thank you very much. I would like now to invite Peter from ECOWAS to elaborate on the following question. Peter, the ECOWAS General Convention on Social Security was drafted in 1993 and finally adopted in 2012. Please, what progress has there been made towards its implementation? And what are the tangible change for migrant workers, and what are the challenges today? Over to you. Peter? Okay, so I think Peter is not yet there. So I will give the floor to Mr. Tunkara, and hopefully we will come back to Peter shortly. So Mr. Tunkara is Senegal, so please allow me to ask his question in French. Bonjour, Monsieur Tunkara. La CIPRES a adopté depuis 2006 une Sorry? OK. Donc, bonjour, Monsieur Tunkara. La CIPRES a adopté depuis 2006 une convention multilatérale de sécurité sociale qui affirme notamment les principes de l'égalité du traitement et de maintien des droits acquis. 15 ans après l'adoption de cet important test, pouvez-vous nous faire un bref état des lieux de la mise en œuvre de cette convention multilatérale et de son rôle dans l'amélioration de la sécurité sociale pour les travailleurs migrants, s'il vous plaît? Vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup et bonjour à tout le monde. C'est effectivement, comme vous l'avez dit, la CIPRES, après avoir fait le constat des faiblesses qui affectent la protection sociale des migrants dans les États membres, a initié à travers un long processus l'adoption d'une convention multilatérale de sécurité sociale qui s'applique dans tous les États membres, afin de pallier essentiellement, donc comme je le disais, la faiblesse de la couverture, mais également afin de neutraliser le principe de territorialité et de nationalité qui affectait le service des prestations aux travailleurs migrants, qui ont des carrières éclatées. Ceci dit donc, à ce jour, cette convention a été ratifiée par 9 États membres et surtout par les États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest et quelques États de l'Afrique centrale. Dans ce cadre-ci, la première phase d'implémentation de cet instrument si important a été d'abord d'assurer la formation des techniciens des organismes de sécurité sociale des États membres. En ce sens que nous avons eu à constater que quand ils ont une connaissance acceptable et une maîtrise acceptable des accords bilatéraux, tel n'est pas le cas pour les conventions multilatérales, surtout quand les travailleurs migrants ont eu des carrières sous 3 ou 4 législations nationales différentes. Donc, les premières années ont été consacrées à la formation. Maintenant, nous nous acheminons sur la mise en place dans chaque organisme de sécurité sociale d'une structure dédiée au traitement des droits des travailleurs migrants. En ce sens que dans certaines caisses des États membres, cette question était l'objet d'un traitement marginal. L'essentiel de l'activité étant tourné vers l'application des conventions bilatérales, surtout les conventions liant nos différents pays francophones avec la France. Et donc, actuellement, c'est dans ce sens que nous déployons des diligences après la formation, mettre en place des unités opérationnelles spécifiquement dédiées au traitement des droits des travailleurs migrants. Voilà à peu près, de manière très synthétique, là où nous en sommes, et nous espérons qu'à la fin de 2021, toutes les institutions de sécurité sociale des États membres seront dotées de ces unités opérationnelles. Bien sûr, nous allons continuer également la formation, parce que les conventions multilatérales sont parfois d'une complexité assez importante. Voilà à peu près ce que je pourrais dire à titre d'introduction.
OK, merci beaucoup, M. Tunkara. Et toujours dans la suite de ce que vous avez dit tout à l'heure, comme vous le savez, dans la région CEDEAO, il y a une convention sur la sécurité sociale. Et donc, nous aimerions savoir, par rapport à votre expertise, quelles sont les complémentarités et les différences entre la Convention multilatérale de la sécurité sociale de la CIPRES et la Convention générale de la CEDEAO sur la sécurité sociale. Merci.
En ce qui concerne ces deux conventions, ce qu'il faudrait d'ores et déjà relever, c'est d'une part les aires géographiques couvertes. On note là-bas d'abord des différences. La convention de la CEDEAO, effectivement, prend en charge les États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, aussi bien francophones, anglophones, lusophones et portugaises. Celle de la CIPRES étend la couverture au niveau des États de l'Afrique centrale, qui ne sont pas donc membres de la CEDEAO, bien sûr. Au plan technique maintenant, ce qu'on peut relever, c'est qu'au niveau de la couverture, la convention de la CEDEAO prend en compte la couverture maladie, ce qui n'est pas encore le cas au niveau de la convention CIPRES. En ce sens-ci, que l'assurance maladie est dans un état embryonnaire, bien malgré les efforts qui de plus en plus sont relevés au niveau des États membres pour instituer cette couverture. C'est dans ce sens-ci que nous avons mis en place un comité technique d'assurance maladie qui, d'une part, essaie d'accompagner les États tout en mettant en place des indicateurs et des ratios afin d'assurer la viabilité des systèmes qui sont mis en place. Au niveau de la CIPRES maintenant, par rapport à la convention CEDEAO, c'est d'abord la prise en compte des assurances, des périodes d'assurance d'1 an, à savoir que même si vous n'avez qu'une année d'assurance, vous avez droit à une prestation aussi minime qu'elle soit. La deuxième chose qu'il faudrait également prendre en compte, c'est que nous nous acheminons de plus en plus, et ça c'est comment je dirais, c'est un projet que nous comptions mener cette année-ci, que malheureusement la période ne s'y prête pas à cause de ce que tous nous savons, à savoir cette pandémie. c'est la mise en place d'un centre de liaison qui prendrait en charge l'ensemble des droits des travailleurs migrants à l'image de ce qui se fait au niveau européen et plus précisément au niveau français, c'est-à-dire l'exemple du CLEIS, c'est-à-dire un centre de liaison au sein de la CIPRES qui, basé, comment je dirais, sur une bonne plateforme informatique avec des techniciens formés qui prendraient en charge l'ensemble des travailleurs migrants pour assurer le suivi, l'application régulière de la législation et plus précisément de la Convention multilatérale CIPRES. Voilà peut-être qu'au niveau du dispositif, ce qui nous différencie un tout petit peu de la Convention de la CEDEAO, à savoir que nous voulons maintenant passer, nous, à une phase pratique et opérationnelle à travers la mise en place d'un centre de liaison. Voilà à peu près où nous en sommes et où est-ce que se situent à peu près les complémentarités et éventuellement les petites différences qu'il y a entre les deux conventions, en ce sens qu'elles sont complémentaires. Je vous en prie. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, M. Tunkara, pour ces informations importantes. Nous voyons que la complémentarité entre la CIPRES et la CEDEAO pour l'extension de la sécurité sociale aux travailleurs migrants est vraiment importante. La CEDEAO étant une institution communautaire et la CIPRES étant une institution qui regroupe les caisses de sécurité sociale qui sont des organismes opérationnels pour étendre la sécurité sociale. Merci beaucoup. So, I will now invite Mr. Nyasha from Zimbabwe to elaborate on the following question. So, Mr. Nyasha, how relevant do you think is the portability of Social Security entitlement for a worker when he or she is offered an opportunity to work abroad? So this is the first question for you, please. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Greetings to everyone. For anyone who's a worker who's looking to migrate, the issue of the portability of their accrued social benefits or social security benefits is very important. I think what is also important is also what we have to also look at is the access to contribute to such benefits. What we have noted is that some of the migrant workers, as much as they want to contribute and be part of any social security schemes that are in the country of host, some of them do not have access to such facilities. So first and foremost, one thing that we should take into cognizance and really work on is their access to participate and to contribute to such schemes. After contributing, it is also important that it becomes also portable, so that when they retire, they can choose to go back to their home countries. The majority of migrant workers are staying in the country of host after retirement because they cannot port their benefits. So it's very, very important and it's very, very relevant for there to be portability of such benefits. It also allows, if we look at the case in point, the COVID period that we are in, if someone is to travel back to their home country, this will allow them also to have access to medical aid and other social amenities that are facilitated by the portability of the benefits of the accrued schemes that they would have been participating in. So it is very, very relevant, and it is very, very key for one to know if their benefits are going to be portable. And it also enables them to make a decision in terms of also returning to their home country. This is after they have worked, or to choose to migrate, that is if they haven't migrated yet, knowing that when I work in the country where I'm migrating to, at the end of the day, I'm able to come back home and retire at home and still get access to the resources that I would have put aside in terms of social security. it also allows them also to fully participate in the development of their country, or their home country, either when they come back after retirement, or during the time that they are there. So it is very critical, and it is very relevant to make sure that there is portability of social security benefits. I think this is my starting point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nyasa, for this use of information on the importance of portability for a worker. My second question for you, historically, the agriculture and mining sector are key sectors employing migrants in the SADC region. What particular problem are migrant agricultural workers and migrant mine workers face in accessing social security and retaining social security benefits, both while working and after returning to the country of residence? Please, you have 3 or 5 minutes for this question. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you again. One of the biggest challenges, as I have highlighted in my last talk, is access to participate in social security schemes in the country of host. Given the majority of people working in the mining sector and also working in the agriculture sector, the biggest challenge that they face is the permission, if I'm to use the word, to contribute to the schemes within the country of host. So most of them do not have access to contribute to it. And the other challenge also is that you get that the majority of people who work in these sectors, most of them, especially in the agriculture sector, are irregular migrants, which makes it even much difficult for them to also participate, as most country legislation do not recognize them as migrant workers due to their irregularity in terms of their migration. So the first point is that they cannot contribute, which then means that accessing issues of portability becomes something else. For those who then contribute, the biggest challenges that they are now facing is that in terms of the portability of the benefits, there are issues in terms of the value. How do you maintain the value of the schemes that they have contributed to the accrued benefits? In what currency are they going to be ported, and how the mechanisms that allows those the funds and the benefits to be ported? You discover that, for example, in Zimbabwe, working with workers from Zimbabwe working in South Africa, as long back as those who worked in what was called Wenela, the majority still haven't got access to those benefits. And sadly, is that these benefits and these funds are there and they are waiting for them to be collected by them and for them to use them. But the process and the mechanism of porting to Zimbabwe or to any other country within the Southern Africa is becoming a challenge, because then the bilateral agreements or the multilateral agreements which governments have to sit down and agree to are not quite clear on how this will be done. And I think, as Maxwell already highlighted, yes, there's work now starting in terms of bringing up the mechanism. You hear that the arguments around, is it issue of harmonization or it's an issue of coordination in terms of the portability of such benefits? So until there is a clear stance at the political level or at the policy level in terms of how these benefits will be ported, then workers within the mining sector and workers within the agriculture sector, whether they contribute or do not contribute, they'll still have that to say, once I return to my home country, how do I get access to these accrued benefits that are there? And also in terms of, this has also led to the majority of people, as I highlighted, not migrating back to their countries of origin and staying in the country of host so that they have access to the accrued benefits that they would have contributed to. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that people, especially in the agriculture sector, so the issue emanates from how then do we regularize their migration? How do we get them documented? How do we get them also to have access to such social security and contribute and pay to them and accrue benefits? So it's a long leg that we have to look at, and it is work that has to be done to make sure that they can contribute. After contributing, they can also port their benefits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Nyasa, for those useful information. I think as Marcel just mentioned, the question of illegal or irregular migration remain a big challenge. The question of harmonization, coordination between social security institutions remain also some big issue we should work on if we want to facilitate access to migrant to social security. So thank you very much for this useful information. So I will now move to Mr. Jacques Samba. I don't know if he was able to join us, but Mr. Samba is from employer organization in Congo. So is in a French-speaking country. I will ask the question in French to facilitate a good understanding. Bonjour, Monsieur Samba. Les agents de placement jouent un rôle important dans la mise en relation des employeurs avec les employés et dans la prise de dispositions pratiques pour les voyages, la délivrance des documents dans les pays d'origine et plus tard dans le paiement et les envois de fonds. Du point de vue des employeurs, quelle est l'importance du rôle des agents de placement dans l'extension de la protection sociale aux travailleurs migrants? Ceci est la première question pour vous. Merci. Mr. Samba? Okay. So, Mr. Samba is not yet in the meeting, so maybe we will come back to him shortly. I will now move to Andrew. Andrew is a senior social protection specialist at ILO, and he was the manager of this project on extending social security to migrant workers. So he's a good resource person for this topic. So Andrew, please, after 3 years of implementation of the project, extending access to social protection and portability of benefits to migrant workers and their family in select in Africa, do you think that regional economic commission have sufficient capacity for a better implementation of regional framework on the extension of social protection to migrant workers? What are the recommendations and lessons learned from the project experiences in ECOWAS, SADC, and EAC for other regional economic commission wishing to develop a regional or sub-regional framework? The floor is yours, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bashabi, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Yeah, regarding the first question, whether the regional economic communities have sufficient capacities. Well, I'm reluctant to say sufficient, but what I would clearly say and confidently say maybe is that from where we are coming from 3 years ago to now, there have been quite a lot of improvement, or if you like, in terms of knowledge sharing and capacities for the implementation of these frameworks. But in fact, this South-South virtual conference is actually designed based on that principle of continuous learning, improvement, and knowledge sharing between actors. I'm also reluctant to say there's sufficient capacity because the RECs are at different levels. Some are starting, others are, for example, the ECOWAS are at the implementation stage. So there's never, but but when it comes to knowledge and capacities generally, it's a moving target. It's all about continuous improvement. But what we did in the project, bear in mind that knowledge and capacities are quite important. We had included capacity building components, both in all the three RECs, ECOWAS, EAC, and SADC, and even at the AU level, in terms of our interventions. And part of the interventions also, in terms of capacity building, we introduced some sustainability dimensions. So most of the knowledge products that we are developed will outlive the project. Say, for example, in ECOWAS, the training materials we provided will outlive the project into the implementation of the convention. We also, at the global level, contributed to the development of the global knowledge product, just to ensure that there's a sustainability dimension in terms of our capacity building. But more importantly, also, we did invest quite a lot of time and resources in data in generating data on social protection for migrant workers, such that such data could help inform policy making, implementation, and monitoring of the interventions. So yes, so that's it about the first question. In the interest of time, I don't. But when it comes to the lessons learned, one of the important lessons learned is actually knowledge and appreciation for social protection for migrant workers, and the need to do it. We find out that when the project started, knowledge about social protection, the key principles were quite limited. And that led to a lot of misconceptions and apprehensions that actually stalled some of the dialogue and processes. For example, Maxwell and a colleague from Zimbabwe had indicated, for example, the issues around coordination and harmonization. There was one of the contentious issues in SADC and EAC that actually stalled some of the discussion. So that's one major a lesson we learned. And that's why we in the implementation of the project, we decided to put a lot of emphasis on capacity building and the development of knowledge product. The other lesson we learned was that there has to be a framework for intervention. Because there is a policy and legal dimension to all of this. So countries or regional economic blocks that already had their frameworks for intervention, whether it's for coverage of migrant workers and also coverage, say regional migration policy framework in place, we are quicker to get the message and put in place mechanisms to push the agenda forward. And this is also what we realized during the COVID pandemic. Countries that had frameworks in place were quicker to yes. Another point, another lesson we learned was the whole social protection for migrant workers is actually placed within the regional migration policy framework. And this regional migration policy framework is actually run and implemented by the regional economic communities. So clearly, the functioning of these regional economic communities and their convening and mobilization power and relationship with the countries were actually very crucial in moving the agenda forward. And that is the example we saw. I mean, if I could cite one example, the relative quick progress and successes in the SADC region. I'm not in any way trying to suggest that the other regional economic communities are not proactive or dynamic. That is not the point. This is just an example of how within a period of about 18 months, SADC was quite quick in moving from a policy to a guideline. So that is quite impressive. And of course, not because I work for the ILO, I can't talk without reference to social dialogue. Part of the success in moving such agendas forward has been the role of social partners in the dialogue and moving things forward. And finally, to wrap up this is the challenge, the underlying issue of knowledge that I spoke to earlier. That's very important, because as we move through the implementation of the project month on month, and how knowledge and understanding of the issues increased, and the levels of apprehension and reduced, we saw a lot more progress. So that is also very important. But just to wrap this up, is the issue of, and the colleagues have alluded to that, is the issue of the large informal sector. Most of the frameworks for social protection generally is based on formal sector design schemes. So that also limits really the reach of the portability dimension, because you can only port what you own. And if you don't have access to social security, contribute to that social security. You can, and that's why the SADC framework was quite apt. It's accrued rights. If you cannot accrue rights, then you cannot port those rights. But that does not mean that migrant workers, even when they don't accrue rights, cannot be protected. And that also comes brings the issue of unilateral measures that member states can take to make sure that migrant workers are protected. But I stop here for now, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for this useful information, and thank you again for the good work you did, you and your team, within this project for extension of social protection to migrant workers. Next question for you. Our previous panelists talk about some challenges and opportunity, but as an expert within this sector, I want you to give us the main challenges and opportunity in the implementation of regional framework on the extension of social protection to migrant workers and their family in Africa. Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm sure colleagues online who don't know me should please bear with me. I'm not, I have a minor speech disability. So please be patient and be a bit attentive. And hopefully, if you don't get any of my points, please feel free to raise them up later. Yeah, I think I will, part of my previous presentation, I did touch on some of the challenges if turned around. I mean, there were challenges, but I want to focus on the opportunities I'll come because I've always in the course of the implementation of the project, I've always been of a very strong view that the challenges are not insurmountable. So let's focus more on so for example, the debates on whether it's harmonization of portability, for example, the debates as to whether the member states are the fact that the member states are at different level in terms of the advancement of social security system, the national social security system. There are also the challenges related to the fact that providing social security for migrant workers might not be affordable, and that it can also within the framework of the regional economic blocks. I mean, some countries might be disadvantaged. There are also the discussions around the question of equity, whether. But I've always been of the strong view that these are challenges that are surmountable. So I will focus on the opportunities briefly. First of all, one major opportunity for whether it's the SADC, EAC, ECOWAS, and even the 5 other regional economic blocks. There's COMESA, ICAS, AMU. I think there are policy and regulatory frameworks that allows for movement of people, that also allows for establishment, that in some cases also allows for access. Almost all social countries in the region have social security institutions. So these policy and regulatory frameworks provide a real opportunity for all of us to come together and push this agenda forward. That relates to also the issue related to this is the issue of building blocks. The EAC, SADC, and the other regional economic communities do have the building blocks. They have clear policies, and in some cases, even at the national level, for frameworks for portability, for coverage of migrant workers and portability. Of course, another big knowledge opportunity is the knowledge out there. Through ILO's work, we have put together a lot of knowledge product, including the global How to Do guide. And also our sister institution, ISA, which is that works very closely with all social security institutions, have developed a whole lot of knowledge products, data portals. So there is a lot of knowledge out there to learn from, not to even speak of the additional knowledge products that this project developed. So there is a lot out there as a really an opportunity to learn from. But there's also beyond Africa, there's a lot of knowledge with social security, and Cyprus, for example, has a number of countries. Cyprus, the Arab Maghreb Union, this REX, and this do have a lot of countries that are engaged in bilateral agreements with countries. And finally, although in a twisted way, COVID presents an opportunity. It has shown the glaring gaps and really the disturbing consequences of not covering every segment of the population. We've seen that COVID did compel a number of countries in Africa and globally to put in place measures for social protection, not only for migrant workers, but social protection generally. So I think COVID has presented an opportunity, but we need to transform these opportunities, these temporary interventions and measures into long-term sustainable measures and interventions to provide adequate security, social security to migrant workers. And it doesn't have to be based on a contributory system or a system that is portable, but it starts with access, but also the need to cover every segment of society, and that ties in very nicely with the ILO's ILO's approach in terms of social protection for all. I stop here for now, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think it is very interesting and encouraging to hear from you that there are some opportunity to extend social security to migrant workers, because this is our main challenge is how we can extend social security to migrant workers and their family. And based on what you just elaborate, I think we can say that we should keep on working, and there are some opportunity to reach this goal. So I will now come back to Mr. Peter from ECOWAS. So welcome, Mr. Peter. The
Thank you.
General Convention on Social Security was drafted in 1993 and finally adopted in 2012. What progress has been made toward implementation, and what are the tangible change for migrant workers, and what are the challenges today? So the floor is yours for maximum 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The ECOWAS General Convention was revised in 2012 and signed by the heads of governments and head of states of ECOWAS. The implementation, however, delayed a little, but the revision and then leading to the signing by the governments and head of states was through the efforts of the ILO, that is the ILO project. But so it was 2017 that the committee of experts was put together that is supposed to guide the implementation. And so immediately the committee was put together, we started working on the various subcommittees that will work on the implementation. One of the challenges that we have was that even though the convention was signed, it was not popularized within member states. So we have challenges of knowing about it until the committee was put in place. So we started disseminating the information to various social protection institutions in our countries, and also set up the subcommittees of the experts committee to start working on various areas. ILO also proceeded with the preparations of the study training materials, and those things were done by ILO, very good materials, rich material, very simple to read and understand. So the next stage was then for training members of the committee of experts. That has also been done. And so the next stage will be implementation of the convention. But a number of issues comes up. There is a need for all members to set a date to implement, because you want to transfer accrued rights. If the other country is not doing it, implementing it, then you are stuck. So that is also one of the challenges that we have, is the need to know when we are starting, so we move together. The other aspect of it, I mean, some countries still the internal constitution, that is the supreme law of those countries, still requires a ratification of a convention of this nature to enable its implementation. Even though the ECOWAS treaty under which the convention was signed as a supplementary, and therefore upon signature it comes into force, we still have those challenges in some of the countries. But there is also the need to also train those who should implement, that is the social protection institutions in the various member countries. That is where we are, and that has to be done. And then also going forward, if you look at the end of the project that is soon to come, how do we sustain the gains that have been made at that implementation? That is where we're going to have challenges. So some of the proposals and suggestions that we have made, that we should encourage the formation of an association under the umbrella of ECOWAS of social protection institutions within the sub-region to come together annually or biannually to continue the process of implementation and discussion and solving the problem that will come up in the course of the implementation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Peter. There is a question for you, but we will start the question and answer section, and maybe come back to you regarding the extension to informal economy. So,
okay.
A few questions. I will start by the question of Mr. Eso. So Mr. Eso has 2 questions, and this question will be assigned to Mr. Tunkara from Cyprus. So the question is in French. Combien de pays ont adopté la convention multilatérale de la Cyprus? La Cyprus avait initié un projet socle de protection sociale prenant en compte l'assurance maladie. Qu'en est-il au jour d'aujourd'hui? Donc, monsieur, vous avez la parole.
OK.
3 minutes. Merci.
Merci. Concernant, je commence par la dernière question, à savoir le socle de protection sociale. C'est une codification normative pour fixer les règles communes de gestion des différentes branches des États de sécurité sociale dans les États membres et en même temps fixer le cadre juridique et institutionnel des organismes de sécurité sociale. Ce projet a été adopté l'année dernière, donc c'est un référentiel qui doit s'imposer dorénavant dans les 16 États membres de la CIPRES, ce qui implique, entre autres, que les dispositions soient internalisées dans les législations nationales. Et à ce titre, le dernier Conseil des ministres qui s'est tenu en décembre a instruit la commission de surveillance de procéder à une évaluation par les États membres de l'internationalisation de ces dispositions communes et de lui rendre compte à chaque session du Conseil des ministres. La première évaluation n'a pas été faite compte tenu des contingences de la période, mais nous estimons que cette première évaluation dans les États membres, nous la ferons au cours de l'exercice prochain si les conditions s'y prêtent avec le Covid. Donc, le projet, ce qu'il faut retenir, le projet a été adopté sous forme non pas de décision, mais de règlement. Deuxième chose, le Conseil a laissé aux États membres une période de 3 ans afin d'internaliser les dispositions dans leur droit interne. Troisième point, la commission de surveillance est chargée de faire des évaluations périodiques chaque année afin de tenir le Conseil informé des diligences faites par les États membres. C'est déjà une avancée qu'on ait un référentiel commun qui gère aussi bien la gestion, le cadre institutionnel des organismes, la gestion des branches techniques, ainsi que les règles de gestion financière et comptable. Donc, à ce niveau-là, il reste tout simplement à notre charge de faire des évaluations périodiques. En ce qui concerne maintenant la Convention multilatérale de sécurité sociale, elle a été à ce jour ratifiée par 9 États membres de la CIPRES. Voilà les quelques éléments que je voudrais apporter en réponse aux questions. Merci.
OK, merci beaucoup. Merci, Président. Merci pour ces réponses importantes. So the next question is from Mr. Ali, and the question is about how we can finance social protection. So the question is, the big problem concerning social protection is how to finance a good and sustainable social protection. So I would like to assign this question to Maxwell and Andrew. So Maxwell, can you please start elaborating on this question?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That is the big question, I believe. I think one of the ways of dealing with the issue of social security and financing has to do more with the inclusion aspect. We tend to be relying more on the contributory aspect or the contributory system of social security, especially when you talk of branches such as your retirement, maternity protection, and the like. I think that's where the main challenge is in terms of financing, because then those schemes tend to cover mainly only participants within the informal economy. So once you have a social security base already being financed by very few players within the market, then you have a problem with sustainability. So this brings us to the practical challenge of what we call extending social security for it to cover players within the informal economy. Because if you look at our countries, the share of the informal economy is huge. In many places, you also see that the trend in terms of informality is actually on the rise. So there is this discussion that we tend to have within, I think I usually say, our privileged circles, where we then believe that the way to go about this is to formalize. Then the lens there is that the informal economy as it is undesirable and we don't want it. So we tend to promote this dual view of the formal sector or economy and the informal sector or the informal economy. Then our thinking is that the other end is the problem, and therefore we must formalize it. Then until we've formalized it, we cannot include them in social protection systems, because this is the lens that we have to first formalize. But the reality on the ground shows that we will have the informal economy in different forms or in different arrangements around for at least a generation, at least. And therefore, the idea of sustainable financing of social protection, I think, has to shift more away from this formalization level of discussion. Important, but we need to see how best to integrate the informal economy as it is. We need to develop products that suit the informal economy, that suit the players there. We need to look at the informal economy and be able to identify the players there, the workers there, the employers there, and treat them in that sector. Organize them in such a way that we can be able to identify them, have discussions with them, understand the products that they would like from the system of social protection, tailor our solutions, tailor our schemes to meet their needs. If we do that, then we develop the base of contributors and participants within the social protection system much more. And that will contribute to sustainability of the schemes. So it is about how we conceptually deal with the informal economy, especially in an African context, where we have the majority of the players in that sector. And therefore, the idea is not to stigmatize, to marginalize them further, but to be responsive to their needs. Once we do that, for me, that is the most sustainable way of financing social protection.
Thank you.
So we need to change the thinking.
Okay. Thank you very much.
This is how I would come in at this stage.
Thank you very much, Maxwell. Andrew, please, can you elaborate on this question regarding sustainability?
Thank you very much. I'll try not to sound very ILO. So, I mean, yeah, I think it starts in very layman's terms. It really starts with what is it that you want to do and whether it's doable. I think that is the starting point. And not to overplay the importance of costing and understanding. But I think a very important starting point is really knowing what what social protection interventions as a nation we want to do, how much will it cost, and how is it going to be financed going forward. I think that is the basic starting point in terms of first knowing and establishing whether it's doable. Of course, I note Maxwell's point in terms of the informal sector. Of course, the ILO has its approaches in terms of the extension of coverage, which I don't want to bore you with. But one of the important things I want to underscore is the issue of solidarity. Solidarity in financing has the potential also of supporting sustainability. You put the monies in the pot. It's the rich cross subsidize the poor. I mean, somehow in the healthy and not so healthy, and also across generations. So I think that element of solidarity we are losing, we have lost over time. And I think it's quite important, bringing in the element of solidarity. And that's why the ILO continues to underscore the point that a mix between contributory and non-contributory is still a way to go. Of course, it's also important because part of the issue where we think social security social protection is not affordable and the interventions cannot be sustainable is that we've really not, and that ties in with my earlier point about knowing, we've really not tried to establish. And that brings me to a related point is when you know, you can look within. And there are, I don't want to use a jargon, but there are approaches like what we call finding fiscal space, finding the money for social protection. There are, if we look within, there are mechanisms, always mechanisms, how we can, one example is how we manage debt, for example, the debt management going forward. Because there's a lot of data that show that countries that debt management, debt repayment, it's crowding out resources that could have gone to social security. Some countries are spending 10 to 15 times on debt management issues that is crowding out. I'm not saying that is not a good thing, but also is important that where when these debts are taken, where they are placed has the tendency to also support human development going forward, and that becomes an investment. And of course, there's also the issue of illicit financial flows. There are many countries that spend in Africa. There are many countries that spend more than 10%, that lose more than 10% of GDP in illicit financial flows, and spend less than 2% on health and social protection broadly. So the point I'm making, the ILO has a list of interventions that can create a space, both policy and fiscal space for social protection. But I think it's important that we look within, and of course. Sustainability of social protection financing also has really the social dialogue dimension, because the key actors have to come on the table to really look into the options that are available, and also the government and actors in social security should actually continue to build a strong investment case for social protection that will support social dialogue towards sustainable financing. I've tried to make this as layman as possible because I don't want to regurgitate ILO, sound so ILO, but these are some of the key issues building on what Maxwell has already said. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Before wrapping up this session, let me come back to Peter, because one of the big challenges raised by our panelists and participants is about fragmentation. So please, Peter from ECOWAS, what will be the advantage and disadvantage of harmonization versus coordination regarding the extension of social security to migrant workers? You have 2 minutes, please. Peter? Okay.
I'm on.
Okay.
I'm on. The issue of harmonization really will take some time. And from experience in Ghana, I think that starting with coordination, where we can coordinate efforts at social protection levels to assist migrants with their accrued benefits, will be a very sure way of starting, as we also work towards harmonization into the future. We in Ghana, for example, have issued the Pension Regulatory Authority has issued what we call the expatriate registration guidelines. And under that guidelines, if you're a foreign worker in Ghana, whether you belong to an informal sector scheme which is privately managed or the formal scheme that are nationally managed, you can transfer your accrued rights to your home country when you retire. And in case of even the informal sector, if you are leaving Ghana for good, you should be able to, under the law, be able to transfer your rights to your country. And through the banking system, you designate your account number to the social security institution. The benefits will be computed, and then it will be transferred to your designated accounts in your home country or even in Ghana for you to transfer. So this is a step that Ghana has taken on its own. And so if you have a similar thing going on in other countries, we can coordinate and be helping migrants in respect of their accrued rights as we all work towards harmonization of our legislation in our countries, like the ECOWAS Convention that we have adopted. If it becomes operational, then we will be achieving harmonization.
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter, for elaborating on this and give an example, a practical example from Ghana. This is very useful for most of countries. So I would like to thank very much our panelists and all of you of which participate in this this panel. In summary, I think that we can say that some progress have been made in establishing a framework at regional, sub-regional level for the extension of social protection to migrant workers. Some progress have been made in capacity building, but regarding the implementation, there are some much effort need to be done. So there are some challenges regarding the issue of coordination, regarding the issue of the big size of informal economy. This is a big challenge for all of our country because of most of migrant workers are in informal economy. There are also some challenges regarding some national constitution that require a ratification of regional convention before entry in force. So these are some challenges raised by our panelists and participants. But as Andrew mentioned, we have some opportunity. So I think we should take advantage of this opportunity and keep on working so that we can reach this goal of extension of social security to migrant workers and their family. So I would like to thank all of you for your participation, for your input, your comment. We were not able to answer maybe all the questions, but I think we will have other opportunity to discuss on this issue of how we can better implement the regional framework for the extension of social security to migrant workers and their workers. So thank you very much. And I would like to invite you to join the next panel that will start in 1 or 2 minutes. So thank you very much and bye-bye. Victoire?
Yes, I just wanted to remind everyone to stay online. The next panel is starting in 5 minutes, and in between, please go have a coffee, have a small, you can just stand up, stretch for the next session, and then we will resume in 5 minutes for the next panel discussion, which is equally as interesting as the one you just followed. Thank you very much and stay tuned.
Thank you, Victor.
Social security is a fundamental right recognized in international human rights instruments and international labour agreements. However, migrants and their families face many challenges to access social security. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected migrant workers and triggered worsening inequalities. Now, more than ever, the importance of social protection for all is evident. The lack of social security coordination may prevent migrant workers from maintaining rights acquired in another state. That is why the International Labour Organization is working to support its tripartite constituents in Africa to extend social protection to migrant workers and their families in 3 selected regional economic communities. As part of the Joint Labour Migration Program, this project aimed to enhance decent work for migrant workers and to extend their access to social protection and portability of benefits. ILO has also carried out interventions at the continental level through technical support to the African Union Commission. In ECOWAS, the project aimed to improve the implementation of the ECOWAS General Convention on Social Security by member states. As a result, The ECOWAS Commission established a committee of experts on social security to monitor the effective implementation of the convention. In addition, the awareness campaign Rights Migrate To was developed to inform migrant workers of their social security rights. In SADC, the project's main objective was to strengthen capacity and policy instruments on portability of social security and other benefits. Thanks to their political commitment, SADC employment and labor sector ministers and social partners adopted the guidelines on the portability of social security benefits in SADC. In EAC, the ILO supported the revision of the Draft Council Directive on the coordination of social security benefits and helped its partners develop a roadmap towards the adoption of the directive. In all three regional economic communities supported by the project, progress has been achieved towards extending social protection to migrant workers. Such success has been directly linked to the commitment of member states, social partners, and other stakeholders in the regional economic communities. Moreover, the flexibility of development and financial partners allowed a timely response to the challenges linked to COVID-19 pandemic. Investing in and strengthening existing social security institutions will be instrumental in building back better a post-COVID-19 world where migrant workers fully enjoy their social security rights. Welcome back. I hope you had a few minutes to just refresh and get ready for the next panel discussion. Thank you so much, Kaman, for that very interesting conversation you had with our previous panelists. Now I have the honor to introduce our moderator for the second panel on good practices in extending social protection to migrant workers through social security and labor agreements in Africa and beyond. Her name is Miss Gloria Moreno Fontes. She is ILO Africa Regional Labor Migration and Mobility Specialist. She is currently coordinating the implementation of ILO's labor migration and refugee response in Africa. Previously, she was in headquarters in the migrant department. Miss Moreno Fontes, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoire. Good afternoon, distinguished representatives, colleagues. I would like to first of all thank you all for continuing to accompany us in the South-South virtual conference, extending social protection to migrant workers and their families. I'm Gloria Moreno Fontes, as mentioned before by Victoire. I'm the ILO's Regional Labor Migration Specialist for Africa. I am your moderator in this last experts panel 2, before the conclusion of our conference. Experts panel 2 is titled Good Practices in Extending Social Protection to Migrant Workers through Social Security and Labor Migration Agreements in Africa and Beyond. Let me start by mentioning that our panel is composed of 5 panelists. I will very briefly mention the list of our 5 panelists. So the first one is Mr. Martin Wandera, representative of the EAC and Director of Labor, Employment and Occupational Safety and Health in Uganda. Then we will have Madame Salima Karbouche, is the representative from Morocco, is the Director of Social Protection in Morocco, followed by the representative of Employers Organization, Ms. Grace Nabakusa, Head of Employment Relations and Legal Federation of Uganda Employers. Our fourth panelist is from the International Social Security Association, Mr. Mariano Brenner. He's the regional coordinator of ISA. And then lastly, we have our ILO migration specialist, Samia Kasi Aoul, labor migration specialist working for the ILO and focal point for work in Africa, particularly on social security protection and social protection for migrant workers. So let me first of all go to our first panelist. Let me just introduce him properly, mentioning a little bit of his background. And I would like to invite now Mr. Wandera, Director of Labor, Employment and Occupational Safety and Health from the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development of Uganda. Let me just mention that Mr. Wandera is a social and labor economist with over 20 years experience in labor, employment, and industrial relations issues. He's currently the Director of Labor, Employment, and Occupational Safety and Health at the Ministry of Gender, Labor, and Social Development of the Republic of Uganda. Prior to his current position, he was Director of the Center for Labor Research and Studies in Kampala, from where he still promoted better working conditions through labor policy research. So, Mr. Wandera, I would like to first start by asking you some questions. In the recent years, Ugandan nationals have been moving to neighboring countries and the Gulf countries in search of work opportunities. In this context, Uganda has been negotiating bilateral labor agreements with GCC countries to better govern this migration trend. So my question to you will be, can you share Uganda's experience with this negotiations, and what are the place for social security rights in these agreements, as well as the challenges that you have been facing in extending social protection to migrant workers? So Mr. Martin Wandera, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gloria, and distinguished panelists. I would like to say that to date, Uganda has signed 3 bilateral labor agreements with Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Jordan. As you all know, the rights of migrant workers are well articulated in a number of ILO and UN conventions. Bilateral labor agreements, therefore, do not create new international rights for migrants. However, BLAs create a legally binding commitment between the host and sending countries to protect, among others, the social security rights of workers. The BLAs that Uganda has signed have provisions for respecting all international recognized rights for migrant workers, including social security rights. I must, however, hasten to add that the actualization of rights in ILO conventions is contingent on the municipal legislation, and particularly ratification of these conventions and transforming them into national laws. In the GCC countries that we have signed with, only Jordan has ratified, for example, Convention 102 on social security. Even where the conventions have been ratified, we note that not all the 9 branches of Social Security are provided or are available for migrant workers. And if the rights of workers are supposed to be protected through bilateral labor agreements, some things must be noted. First, any country that is going to engage, from our experience, in bilateral labor agreement negotiations must undertake adequate research and preparation, including knowing what the municipal laws provide for in terms of rights of migrant workers. Otherwise, if you do not know that, you will enter a bilateral agreement and at the end realize that your workers do not have any protection. 2, the negotiation teams must be adequately prepared. And also, as you know, legal instruments, however good, are not self-enforcing. So an effort must be made, especially by the sending country, to ensure that there are robust implementation mechanisms. And the other point that is key in ensuring protection that is afforded through bilateral labor agreements is ensuring that there is a robust monitoring and evaluation mechanism. In the case of Uganda, all the BLAs that we have signed have a joint technical committee which meets periodically to review progress on implementation of the bilateral agreement. On what the place of Social Security rights is in these bilateral labor agreements, I would like to repeat what I said. All international human rights are guaranteed in these bilateral labor agreements. However, protection is contingent on what is available in the municipal legislation. If something is not provided for in the municipal legislation, it becomes difficult to implement it. And that is why ratification of ILO conventions on the rights of migrant workers should become a critical issue. The International Labour Office should step up promotional efforts of ratification and domestications of these instruments. Now, on the question of the challenges that we have faced in extending social protection to migrant workers, I would like to say that many of the municipal laws do not afford migrant workers the same rights as their nationals. The common right that is Social Security right that is afforded to migrant workers is the right to access medical. Many do not have any access to old age or retirement Social Security benefits, either contributory or by the state. The other point that we have faced in protecting the right of migrant workers is that limited knowledge of the rights of migrant workers by themselves, because the starting point of rights protection is awareness, and self-representation is key. You should be able to claim your right, but you can only claim it if you are aware of it. And what we are doing in Uganda is to do pre-departure orientation to make sure that the workers know the provisions in their employment contracts. The other point is limited manpower at the diplomatic missions, because in the face of distress, migrant workers need consular support from missions. Uganda has only 2 missions in the Middle East, that is in Abu Dhabi, in UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, for example, covers Jordan, covers Kuwait, covers Bahrain and Oman, which makes it difficult for them to give the required support. The other issue that we have faced is the lack of a robust online complaints management information system. There is need for a system where workers under distress or whose rights have been violated are able to quickly report, and then response is also provided. The other point is that there is need, if the social security rights of workers are to be protected, there should be regular monitoring missions abroad, so that the officials from the Ministry of Labor, for example, are able to travel, speak to the migrant workers, and know exactly what is happening on ground. Finally, the other challenge that we are facing is that of workers who have been placed abroad through irregular pathways. And this creates a challenge because they are difficult to trace. Because if you can't be traced, then you cannot receive consular support, even where your rights have been violated. For now, I can stop there, and I'll be willing to take up any follow-up questions. Thank you very much, Gloria.
Thank you very, very much, Martin, for that very good presentation and for highlighting such important issues such as technical committees, making sure that Social Security agreements are well implemented, the fact that there should be regular monitoring missions that should be following up on the implementation, the importance of ratification of ILO conventions of Social Security for nationals and migrant workers, and the importance also of stepping up also on the presence of diplomatic missions, how important it is so that they can also provide the necessary support to migrant workers themselves and follow up on the right implementation of Social Security agreements, because very often they can just stay on writing, but we do need to make sure that they are rightly implemented. Thank you very much for that. Let me now go to our second panelist, who is Ms. Salima Karbouch, Director of Social Protection from Morocco. Let me introduce her properly, mentioning that she's the Central Director of the Workers' Social Protection Department from the Ministry of Labor and Professional Insertion of Morocco. Salima holds an MBA with a major in finance from the University of St. Thomas Aquinas College in New York, and a bachelor's degree in systems engineering. She started her career as head of the internet department within a large Moroccan company, and subsequently joined the public sector as head of strategic programming at the Caisse Marocaine de Retraite under the Ministry of Economy and Finance. Since 2015, she's the Director of Social Protection for Workers in the Ministry of Labor and Professional Integration of Morocco. So Salima, I would like to start by asking you this question. Morocco has a number of social security agreements with European countries such as Spain and France. Recently, the country has shown a growing interest in concluding social security agreements with ECOWAS countries and an interest in the ECOWAS General Convention on Social Security. First of all, what has been Morocco's experience in implementing existing social security agreements? What are the challenges and lessons that the country has learned that will shape future negotiations, in particularly negotiations with ECOWAS member states? So the floor is yours, Salima, for 5 minutes, and thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you.
Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Tout d'abord, je remercie Madame Fontes pour ces questions. tout d'abord, c'est un plaisir pour moi de participer avec vous à ce panel dédié à la protection sociale des travailleurs migrants en Afrique, et ce, afin de partager avec vous les bonnes pratiques en termes d'extension de la protection sociale aux travailleurs migrants, et ceci via les accords bilatéraux de sécurité sociale et de conventions de travail en Afrique et au-delà. Je profite de cette occasion pour remercier tout d'abord le BIT, le Bureau régional de l'UIT pour l'Afrique, pour son accompagnement permanent aux différentes actions et activités, notamment celles ayant trait à la migration et aux droits des migrants. Donc, par rapport à votre question concernant l'expérience du Maroc en matière d'accord de sécurité sociale, il faut rappeler l'intérêt porté par le Maroc à ces accords depuis les années 60. Ces années ont été marquées par une recrudescence de la migration des salariés marocains vers l'étranger, ce qui a abouti à une hausse des flux migratoires des Marocains pour le travail et dans le cadre du regroupement familial, plus particulièrement vers les pays européens. L'intensification de ces flux a été encouragée d'une part par les besoins grandissants des pays d'accueil aux main-d'œuvre étrangère et d'autre part par l'instauration d'un cadre institutionnel favorable qui s'est concrétisé par la signature de plusieurs accords bilatéraux de main-d'œuvre. À cet effet, l'effectif des Marocains résidant à l'étranger a plus que doublé en l'espace de 15 ans pour dépasser les 4 millions de personnes actuellement. Pour vous donner plus de détails en termes de répartition géographique, la France demeure le principal pays d'accueil des travailleurs marocains, soit environ un tiers des Marocains résidant à l'étranger, suivi de l'Espagne avec 20%, de l'Italie avec 15%. L'Espagne et l'Italie qui ne se sont ouverts à la migration marocaine que dans les années 80 ont accueilli plus d'effectifs que la Belgique, les Pays-Bas et l'Allemagne. Ces derniers pays figurent parmi les signataires des conventions de main-d'œuvre avec le Maroc. Aussi, il existe des Marocains qui se sont installés également aux États-Unis, aux pays d'Afrique, au Canada et aux pays de Golfe. Néanmoins, l'Europe demeure le principal continent d'accueil des Marocains. L'effectif des Marocains étrangers qui résident dans les pays européens atteint plus de 3 800 000 personnes, soit une proportion des Marocains à l'étranger de 86,5%. Comme je l'ai dit auparavant, l'organisation de cette immigration a été effectuée par le biais des conventions de main-d'œuvre signées par le Maroc depuis les années 60, qui ont été complétées par des conventions de sécurité sociale pour garantir la protection sociale des travailleurs marocains et de leurs membres de famille au pays d'accueil et pour permettre la préservation et la portabilité de leurs droits en matière de sécurité sociale. Comme vous le savez, les accords de sécurité sociale se basent sur les principes énoncés par les normes internationales de travail, la Convention 118 sur l'égalité de traitement, la Convention 157 sur la conservation des droits en matière de sécurité sociale et la recommandation 167 sur la conservation des droits en matière de sécurité sociale. Ainsi, les dispositions des accords de sécurité sociale permettent d'assurer une égalité de traitement en matière de sécurité sociale, le maintien des droits acquis et en cours d'acquisition, la totalisation des périodes d'assurance et le transfert des prestations vers le pays d'origine. Dans ce cadre, notre ministère a pour attribution l'élaboration des projets de textes de convention de sécurité sociale, la négociation de ces projets ou des projets proposés par les pays étrangers et finalement le suivi de l'application des conventions une fois mises en vigueur. Les premiers pays avec qui le Maroc a signé des conventions de sécurité sociale sont la France en 1965, la Belgique en 1986, les Pays-Bas en 1972 et l'Espagne en 1979. Actuellement, 15 conventions sont en vigueur, dont 3 ont été mises à jour. Il s'agit des conventions signées avec la France, la Belgique et la Tunisie. Ces mises à jour ont été imposées par une adaptation des dispositions aux évolutions connues par les régimes de sécurité sociale et par l'extension et pour le souhait d'étendre le champ personnel, notamment pour permettre aux pensionnés et à leurs ayants droit de bénéficier des prestations en nature en cas de retour à leur pays d'origine.
Salima, pardon de t'interrompre, mais est-ce que c'est possible de parler un tout petit peu plus doucement parce que les interprétateurs, ils sont en train d'avoir un peu de problèmes pour te suivre. Il paraît que tu parles trop vite. So,
oui, parfait. Dans la pratique, nous procédons ainsi. Une fois qu'il y a un consensus pour signer un accord de sécurité sociale, des commissions mixtes de sécurité sociale qui sont composées des représentants des autorités et des organismes compétents, marocains et étrangers, se réunissent régulièrement dans un premier temps pour la finalisation du projet de convention et pour après le suivi de l'application de la convention une fois en vigueur. Il y a lieu de souligner que pour assurer une meilleure coordination du système de sécurité sociale par le biais des accords de sécurité sociale, les organismes et les caisses compétentes de sécurité sociale doivent disposer d'un système d'information performant et des moyens techniques de communication assurant des échanges efficaces et rapides de données et des demandes. Également, les pays signataires doivent s'engager au respect des données personnelles et d'assurer une sensibilisation des assurés sur leurs droits garantis par les conventions de sécurité sociale. Je veux dire par là la préparation, par exemple, de guides indiquant de manière simple les procédures à suivre pour pouvoir bénéficier des prestations sociales par le biais de formulaires élaborés à cet effet. Pour l'Afrique, vu le nombre important de nos ressortissants installés dans certains pays et réciproquement le nombre de travailleurs de ces pays accueillis au Maroc, et pour renforcer davantage la coopération dans le domaine de sécurité sociale, en parallèle avec les autres domaines économiques, environnementaux et culturels, en alignement avec la stratégie royale pour l'Afrique, le plan stratégique du ministère prévoit la prise en contact pour un échange avec les pays partenaires de projets de convention de sécurité sociale. Un projet de convention a été déjà échangé avec le Sénégal et d'autres projets sont inscrits dans ce plan. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Salima. C'était une très intéressante présentation. Je pense qu'on va passer à la présentation de Madame Grace Nabakusa. Madame Grace Nabakusa est so I will go into English now. So she's head of employment relations and legal services from the Federation of Uganda Employers. She has held this position since 2006 Grace has interacted closely with employers in East Africa, and her core job role is advisory for compliance with the employment laws and ensuring a business-friendly environment for employers through policy advocacy. So I would like to start by asking the following to Ms. Grace Navakusa. In the point of view of employers, what is the importance of having a social security agreement with a country from which you, as employer, might have interest in hiring staff? And how does this factor in the search and hiring process of new talents offers perspective of employees to employers? So thank you very much, Ms. Grace Navakusa, for your presentation. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you. Oh, I think we have a technical problem. It seems that Ms. Grace Navakusa was disconnected, could not connect. So probably what we can do is go to Mr. Mariano Brenner and wait for Grace to connect again. I think there was a technical issue. So let me then continue with our panelist, Mr. Mariano Brenner. He's the regional coordinator for the Americas and the Portuguese-speaking countries from the International Social Security Association. Mariano is an Argentine lawyer with an MBA and a specialist in social protection. He's currently the regional coordinator for the Americas and the Portuguese-speaking countries at the ISA, as I mentioned before. He has worked before as National Director for Social Security Regimes and Head of Delegation for the negotiations of international agreements. Prior to that, he was in charge of international affairs at the Secretary of Social Security in the Ministry of Labor, Employment and Social Security in Argentina. So my question to you, Mariano, will be the following. We know that there is a variety of social security agreements, bilateral, regional, and multilateral agreements that even extend beyond one continent. Why should a country choose one over the other when deciding on how to move forward to extend social security to migrant workers? And can you share with us some examples where one type of social security agreement will be preferred to another? So thank you, Mariano, for being with us. And the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Mariano, we have an issue with your micro. Can you please make sure that your micro is on mute? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank
you. So I will start again. First of all, thank you for the invitation and for having a chance to participate in this very interesting webinar. Concerning your question, there are more than 500 Social Security agreements in force around the globe, and there are advantages and disadvantages to both type of agreements. Examples of multilateral agreements are the EU regulations on the coordination of Social Security systems, the Ibero-American Agreement on Social Security, which is the one that has the particularity that involves 2 different continents, and the Cyprus Convention on Social Security that was mentioned in the previous session. And examples of bilateral agreements, there are plenty. I just chose 3 randomly: Argentina and Spain, Japan and the USA, and Egypt and Tunisia. Now, concerning the Social Security agreements, one important thing to keep in mind is that they only apply to formal employment. That is to say, that is employment that is registered with the Social Security of the country. So informal workers will not benefit from these conventions. Concerning the entering into negotiations, in the case of multilateral agreements, it's usually more difficult to start the negotiations, and they come from a meeting of presidents or prime ministers where they decide that they want to get into the negotiations of these types of agreement, and you can usually find a resolution in the conclusions of the meeting mentioning their interest to start the negotiations. On the other hand, when you do it bilaterally, it's much more simple. You do it through the Foreign Affairs Ministry, or you do it directly with a note that you send to the other party that you want to start negotiations. Then concerning the participants, when you talk about a multilateral agreement, of course, it's 3 or more parties, countries that will be involved. The benefit of this type of agreement is that when in the region, there's a country that is reluctant to enter into a negotiation, if the whole region starts negotiation, it's more likely that they will start the negotiations too than if you try to do it bilaterally. On the other hand, the bilateral agreements, it's 2 parties, and it doesn't necessarily have to be from the same region. As I mentioned before, it can be Japan and the States, for example, that are completely different continents. Concerning the reach, the extension of the potential beneficiaries of these conventions, of course, is greater when there are more countries involved. But there's also important to keep in mind, there's one of the clauses in the agreements that is the personal scope clause that determines whether this can benefit only nationals of the countries involved or anybody that has worked in these countries that have signed the agreement. Now, concerning the rights and obligations, when you sign a multilateral agreement, the same rights and obligations apply to all the people, all the countries involved in that convention. On the other hand, if you have multiple bilateral agreements, then it can be that different rights applies to different people depending on what agreement they are making use of. Concerning the negotiation process, of course, the more parties that are involved, the longer it is and the more complicated that it takes. On the case of the bilateral agreements, it's simpler, it's more flexible. And even when you, as Salima was saying, when you start a negotiation, you have rounds of negotiations. You meet with the other party. Now, defining a date to do this when it's only 2 parties is simpler than doing it when there are 3 or more parties involved. Concerning the entering into force, once again, it's easier to do it when you have a bilateral agreement because there's only 2 countries that have to do their internal processes of approval to then have it enforced. When it's 3 or more countries, there's 2 things. One, you need more countries to do this process, and then the process, the actual enforcement of the agreement can be done even before all of the countries have enforced it internally. Again, this was said in the previous session when they were talking about the Cyprus agreement, that 9 countries have signed it, and sorry, from the 16 countries, 9 countries have approved it and have it enforced. Then concerning the administration of the agreement, normally when it's a multilateral agreement, there's a third party that is involved that helps with the administration of the agreement. In the case of CARICOM, for example, the agreement between the Anglo-speaking countries in the Central America, is the Caribbean Community Secretariat that is involved and follows up the agreement. In the case of a bilateral agreement, this such third party is not necessary. So it's only the two parties that communicate directly. As for regard the information exchange, we were saying that, okay, we signed the agreement and then it gets enforced, but then for people to actually benefit from it, there has to be an exchange of information. This information exchange is done with forms. When we have a multilateral agreement, it's the same form that will apply to all the parties. When we have bilateral agreements, we will have different forms for each agreement. This is much more difficult to administer because then you would have different sets of form for each type of agreement that the country has signed when it's bilateral. Of course, on the other hand, negotiating these forms, it's easier when it's a bilateral agreement than when it is a multilateral agreement. Then concerning the amendments, when you have to update an agreement, once again, it is more flexible and it's easier to do it when it's a bilateral agreement than when it is a multilateral agreement. Now, concerning the coexistence, there can be that there are agreements, bilateral agreements and multilateral agreements that involve the same parties. So these agreements are not necessarily mutually excluding. They can coexist. And sometimes a bilateral agreement is a base to a subsequent multilateral agreement and the other way around. There's also a clause that is included in the agreements sometimes that is called the most favorable clause. That means that in case there are a bilateral agreement and a multilateral agreement, the provisions that are most favorable will be applied. So I can't really say which one or how to choose. I think it really depends on the context. If you are aiming for a regional freedom of movement and economic, it's usually best to have a multilateral agreement. It is also more difficult to start, so you can start with bilateral agreements and then move on to a multilateral agreement. But there's not a set rule on when it's correct or when you should do one or the other. It really has to do with each case in particular.
Thank you very, very much, Mariano, for that very interesting talk. You mentioned issues that we had not mentioned in the past presentations. So about, for example, the coexistence or not no exclusion between bilateral and multilateral agreements in the case of countries that have signed both of them. So this is possible. And it is important to highlight it. The importance of the exchange of information. You mentioned that it's whenever we have more than 3 countries, well, the entering into force can be, of course, longer. The case of countries that will need a third party to be involved in the implementation, like in the case of CARICOM, the administration, in fact, of the agreement. So these are all very, very interesting issues that we have not really mentioned in past presentations. So thank you very much, Mariano. We will, you will be asked more questions in the next round of questions, but for the moment, I think we will go now to the presentation of Ms. Samia Kasi Aoul, who is our next panelist. Samia is a labor migration specialist for the ILO. She's a focal point also for the Africa region on labor migration and mobility backstopping. She provides policy guidance and technical support to ILO's constituents in the region. She first joined the ILO in 2004 as an associate expert in social protection in ILO Algiers office. In 2008, from 2008 to 2011, she was in charge of the implementation of an ILO project funded by the German government entitled Extending Social Security Coverage to African Migrant Workers. She graduated from the University of Panthéon-Sorbonne in Paris, in economics and development, and from the University of Quebec at Montreal in political science from the International Relations and Cooperation Department. So Samia, thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is yours. Oh, let me just mention the guiding questions, sorry, for Samia. So Samia, bilateral labor agreements are concluded between countries of origin and destination to regulate migration for employment, and they have been in use for over a century. And they continue to be widely used by states around the world, including in Africa. Could you explain, please, how bilateral labor agreements or MOUs can help improve migrant workers' social protection? And in addition, how can they be useful in times of crisis? So thank you very much, Samia, and the floor is yours for five minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So thank you for inviting me to this very interesting panel. I already learned quite a bit. So your question about BLAs and how they can improve migrant workers' social protection is very interesting. And Mr. Vandera already mentioned quite a few important issues in this respect. Indeed, BLAs can be useful tools for protecting migrant workers' rights, including in relation to social protection. But this is the case if they are drafted actually and implemented in accordance with the principles embedded in international human rights instruments and international labor standards. Mr. Mandera mentioned that. I think it's very important to keep in mind. Compared to unilateral approaches, the BLAs are quite useful because they formalize shared responsibilities between countries of origin, countries of destination, and this at each stage of the migration cycle, from pre-departure to working and living abroad, and finally upon return and reintegration. And they also have the advantage of being adaptable to specific groups of workers, like migrant workers, like domestic workers, for instance, self-employed or agricultural seasonal migrant workers. So they take into account their specificities. ILO standards, it was mentioned, a number of standards and also international human instruments encourage the use of bilateral labor migration agreements. And they provide these instruments substantial guidance for developing rights-based BLAs, including for the social protection of migrant workers. And the guiding principle in international labor standards with respect to social security is the equality of treatment. And this principle is embedded in, should be embedded also included in bilateral labor agreements, not only in social security agreements. And to give effect to this principle, BLAs should include provisions ensuring that migrant workers are treated no less favorably than national workers. So this equality of treatment between nationals and non-national is key within BLAs. Apart from including specific provision on equality of treatment, bilateral labor agreements should also include detailed information on the rights of migrants under the applicable labor and social security law of the destination country, and specify also the social security branches which are covered. This is essential. It is also important that BLAs refer to existing or forthcoming bilateral social security agreements to ensure, as was mentioning Salima, the maintenance of accurate rights and rights in course of acquisition. The ILO Migration for Employment recommendation, the recommendation 86, includes in an annex a model agreement, which can be a useful source of guidance when you develop bilateral labor agreements. And recently, the Global Compact, which was adopted, also make a specific reference to the need to integrate social security provisions in bilateral labor agreements. And the ILO is currently working with the UN network on migration to develop global guidance on BLAs. And obviously in this global guidance, there will be also the issue of social protection for migrant workers. Gloria, you raised the point of how these instruments can also be useful in times of crisis. And in relation to crisis, I think the past few months have shown how migrants can be vulnerable, and in particular to health risks, but also to the effects of economic slowdown. And BLAs should include actually provision that take into account the possible onset of crisis. And I think we've seen that countries were not enough prepared to take into account the effects of the crisis on migrant workers in many countries. And the ILO Employment and Decent Work for Peace and Resilience recommendation that was recently adopted, the recommendation 205, provides guidance in this regard. In context of crisis, BLAs can serve to clearly outline the responsibilities in terms of providing healthcare, but also income support measures and other measures to ensure the welfare of migrant workers, both during their time abroad and upon return to their country of origin. I think this is important. The floor is back to you, Gloria. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Samia, for mentioning the importance of the guiding principle, equality of treatment. So migrant workers should not be treated less favorably to national workers. This is key in the negotiation of bilateral labor agreements. And of course, that the ILO is developing this global guidance on bilateral labor agreements that will soon be ready for all of us. Okay, so now we will try to see if we have with us Grace that could not do her presentation before. Is Grace with us now? Are we going to be counting? Oh, okay, so we hear from our organizers that Grace is not with us. Okay, so now what we can do is go into the questions and answers. Okay, questions and answers session. Okay, so we have a question to Salima Karbouche. Okay, I'll say it in French. Salima, quand il y a un employeur qui veut engager un travailleur, un migrant, et est en train de voir pour obtenir une autorisation du ministère de l'Emploi de Maroc. Est-ce que c'est possible que tu nous parles de cette autorisation? À quel moment le ministère du Travail va autoriser ces travailleurs de pouvoir rentrer dans les pays, et quel est les liens entre ces permis de travail et l'existence de la sécurité sociale de ces travailleurs? Est-ce que tous ces travailleurs vont être couverts par la sécurité sociale des Maroc? Oui, c'est ça la question. Est-ce que ces travailleurs vont pouvoir bénéficier de la sécurité sociale au Maroc? Merci. Merci, Salima.
Merci à vous, Madame Gloria. Donc, c'est le volet de la migration du travail des étrangers. Comme vous le savez, actuellement, le Maroc est considéré non seulement comme un pays de départ et de transit, mais aussi un pays d'accueil et d'installation. C'est son niveau de croissance, sa position géographique particulière dans le continent africain qui ont attiré les vagues de migration. En 2013, la politique migratoire au Maroc, comme déjà mentionné dans votre question, la première question, a connu un tournant important suite aux très hautes orientations de Sa Majesté le Roi, qui a donné au gouvernement ses instructions pour développer une politique migratoire humaniste dans sa philosophie globale, dans son contenu responsable, dans sa démarche en phase de l'évolution du phénomène et pionnière au niveau régional. Le Maroc a ainsi confirmé sa place en tant qu'acteur dynamique sur les questions migratoires à l'échelle internationale, en plus de son adhésion aux instruments internationaux de protection des droits des migrants. Le Maroc a pris l'initiative en 1990 de travailler avec un groupe de travail sur un instrument ionysien qui deviendra par la suite la Convention de protection de tous les travailleurs migrants et des membres de leur famille, adoptée par les États-Unis en décembre 1990. Le Maroc est devenu depuis cette date un acteur incontournable et une partie prenante des principales initiatives internationales concernant la migration. Pour ce qui concerne l'emploi des migrants, il est régi par les dispositions du Code du travail marocain de 2004. Au niveau du chapitre 5 relatif à l'emploi des salariés étrangers, il s'agit plus spécifiquement des articles 516 à 521, et de par la loi numéro 1912 fixant les conditions de travail d'emploi des travailleurs domestiques, cet emploi est subordonné de par l'article 516 au Code de travail. L'obtention d'une autorisation de l'autorité gouvernementale chargée du travail est nécessaire. Il est accordé sous forme de visa apposé sur le contrat de travail. Aussi, l'emploi de tout étranger doit être fixé dans un contrat dont le modèle est établi par l'arrêté du ministère du Travail et de l'Insertion professionnelle. Sachant que les dispositions du Code de travail marocain sont applicables sur tout l'ensemble du territoire national sans discrimination entre les salariés, cette discrimination qu'elle soit fondée sur la race, la couleur, le sexe, l'handicap, la situation conjugale, la religion, l'opinion politique, l'appartenance, l'origine nationale et sociale. Cela est stipulé au niveau du préambule du Code de travail. Aussi, dans le cadre du travail domestique, la loi 1912 de 2016 fixant les conditions de travail de l'emploi des travailleurs domestiques dispose dans son article 3.3 qu'en cas d'occupation des travailleurs domestiques étrangers, et seront appliquées les dispositions du Code du travail contenues dans le chapitre 4 et 16 du Code relatif à l'emploi des travailleurs étrangers. Dans ce cadre, afin de moderniser et de dématérialiser le service de visa du contrat pour une meilleure réactivité, les contrats du travail réservés aux étrangers sont gérés par un système informatique baptisé Tachir, qui a été développé par le ministère. Ce système est destiné aux employeurs, aux personnes morales, aux physiques, faisant appel à des compétences étrangères. Ce système permet de s'informer sur les procédures de demande de visa du contrat de travail réservé aux étrangers, créer, enregistrer, modifier des projets de contrat de travail, valider et imprimer les contrats de travail à signer, éditer la liste des pièces constituant le dossier de demande de visa, suivre le traitement des demandes de visa déposées, recevoir en temps réel les notifications liées au traitement des demandes de visa et enfin obtenir la réponse de l'administration aux demandes de visa dans un délai maximum de 10 jours. Pour les travailleurs couverts par les dispositions des accords de main-d'œuvre, ils bénéficient automatiquement des prestations garanties par les accords de sécurité sociale. Toutefois, en cas de détachement, il y a des clauses au niveau des accords de sécurité sociale, c'est au niveau du chapitre législation applicable, qui permettent aux travailleurs détachés d'être exonérés de l'assujettissement au régime de sécurité sociale marocain et d'être maintenus au régime de sécurité sociale dans son pays d'origine. J'espère que j'ai pu éclairer, je vous éclairer par mes réponses et je reste à votre disposition pour tout éclaircissement. Merci.
Oui, super, Salima. Tu as bien présenté et décrit le système de contrat de travail des Maroc. Et vraiment, on a beaucoup appris de ta présentation. Merci beaucoup. Décidément, il y a encore une autre question pour toi, Salima, que je voudrais te demander encore de parler un petit peu sur ça. C'est concernant la CEDEAO, les pays de la CEDEAO. Tu as mentionné le fait que Maroc a un accord, je pense, avec le Sénégal, si je pense que j'ai bien noté ça, ou est en train de négocier. Est-ce que tu peux nous parler de ça? Et puis, la question, c'est pour le reste des pays de la CEDEAO, avec quel pays le Maroc s'intéresse ou est en train de négocier des accords avec les pays de la CEDEAO, et quel pays de la CEDEAO le Maroc a déjà peut-être avec lesquels il a déjà commencé à en discuter sur la possible négociation de ces accords bilatéraux. Ou est-ce que vous êtes en train de parler aussi d'un accord plus multilatéral? Est-ce que toutes ces questions sont pour toi, Salima? Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous, Madame Gloria. Donc, comme je l'ai dit, pour notre continent africain, la politique pour le Maroc, c'est d'aller à l'avant en parallèle avec la coopération au niveau économique. Donc, c'est la sécurité sociale, il faut aussi aller à l'avant dans ce secteur ou dans ce domaine aussi. Comme je l'ai dit, il y a un projet de convention avec le Sénégal. Donc, ce pays qui accueille beaucoup de salariés sénégalais sont accueillis au Maroc. Donc, si on voit au niveau de la CNSS des salariés déclarés à la Caisse nationale de sécurité sociale marocaine, on voit que pour les pays africains, le Sénégal vient en premier lieu pour les salariés déclarés, donc suivi de la Côte d'Ivoire, donc et suivi aussi de la Guinée et du Mali. Et si, vice-versa, on regarde les Marocains qui sont installés dans les pays africains, on voit que les Marocains sont installés en grand nombre à la Côte d'Ivoire, au Sénégal. Donc, si on voit par rapport au effectif des immigrants, que ce soit marocains en Afrique, que ce soit des pays africains au Maroc, et des pays plus précisément aussi des pays de la CEDEAO, donc c'est le souhait du Maroc d'ouvrir des négociations, il est inscrit dans notre plan d'action, bien sûr, il est inscrit dans notre plan d'action. Donc, s'il y a un souhait réciproque de part des autres pays, donc nous sommes prêts et disposés à échanger des projets de convention et commencer des négociations dans ce sens.
Super, merci beaucoup, Salima. C'est clair maintenant pour nous tous. OK, alors il y a, I'll go into English now. There is a question on migrants in an irregular situation and the fact that they are, most of them, in the informal economy. So I think this question will go to Samia, so that she can guide us on how can we improve their situation in the case of migrants in an irregular situation in the informal economy, and how can we be guided on what steps they should be taken, or their governments should be taken, either the countries of origin and the countries of destination, in terms of in the future achieving their labor and social protection. So we are not only talking about social security agreements, but also more broader issues, also including labor issues. But of course, we are stressing the social protection side or the angle of this issue. So Samia, can you please explain to us about this issue? How can their situation be improved? We know that thousands and thousands of migrant workers, African migrant workers abroad, are in an irregular situation. They are in the informal economy. When are we going to be able to improve their situation, and how can this be done? Thank you, Samia, for your.
Can you see me, Gloria?
Yes, we can see you now. Yes.
Okay. So this is a very important issue, as you mentioned. Large numbers of migrant workers are in an irregular situation or work in the informal economy, and hence it's quite a challenge to extend social protection to them, and in particular for contributory social protection. As we know, and this was also one of the comments that Alice Cissé made in the chat box in the Q&A, most migrants move across border in an irregular situation, and particularly in the Africa continent, or work in the informal economy, and this is quite challenging for social security instruments to cover them. Plus, obviously, the coverage of social protection in the region remains quite low, and the standard recommendation, which will be to negotiate social security agreements, will not necessarily improve their social protection. So countries have other options to extend social protection to migrant workers. For instance, they can try to regularize their status to make sure that they can have the possibility to contribute to social protection, or to also be able to benefit from social assistance. On a unilateral basis, a number of countries can do so. And we have a number of experiences and examples from many countries who even provide access to healthcare or some sort of benefits, social protection benefits to migrants who are in an irregular situation. This is the case of quite a few countries in Europe. But we have seen also during the recent crisis that countries were quite eager to ensure more health protection to migrants, even if they were overstaying their visa or were not with a regular status, because this was a public health issue. So I think we need to also take this very much into account. There are other options, for example, as many migrants who cannot benefit from social security agreements, they can also, when they return to their country of origin, if their countries has this possibility, they could benefit from any national social protection floors that is available to citizens, for instance. And we see that Cape Verde, for example, has authorized social pension or extended social pension to returning migrants and to migrants working in the informal economy. So there are some promising examples even in the Africa region, but definitely much more needs to be done to extend social protection to these particular vulnerable group of workers. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you very much, Samia. It's really, really promising that at least some countries are taking steps forward to extend social protection to migrant workers in an irregular situation and in the informal economy. So this is really great to know. Okay, now I think there is a question to Mr. Mariano Brenner. It is about the involvement of employers and workers representatives in the negotiation of bilateral and multilateral agreements. And I think it is about making sure that they are, both of them, workers and employers organizations representatives, are present in these negotiations. Can you, Mariano, tell us, because I'm sure that ISA has a lot of publications, probably a database on social security agreements. Can you tell us about this, and if you have been doing some research on how important it is, the presence of employers and workers organizations in these negotiations? Are they, can you identify if in most of the cases they are there and they bring up the most important issues that concern migrant workers? So can you tell us a little bit more about this, and probably mention, if possible, about your publications on these issues, and probably also if you have a database about this on social security agreements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salima. I can speak from my own experience. It is normally not the case that the employers and the employees are at the table of negotiations. What we normally do is internal negotiations with them, internal consultations with them before going to the rounds of negotiations with the other parties. So I have never seen, I have negotiated quite a few agreements, and I have never seen the representatives of the employers or the employees at the table. But yes, they are consulted, and they are aware of the different processes of negotiations that are going on. We do not have any publications concerning this. Speaking about specifically the intervention of the employers and the employees, we do have a lot of studies and analysis on social security agreements. Our focus is particularly on the existing social security agreements and also the branches included in these agreements. What we found out is that for the most part, none of the agreements include all the branches of social security. The ones that we find are most common in the agreements are old age, disability, and survivors benefits. And then they are followed by work injury, seconded by family allowances and maternity, and lastly, and in the least of the agreements, the medical care and the employment. I don't know if that answers your question, Salima.
Yes, perfect. Perfect. It's Gloria.
Sorry, Gloria.
No, that's great. That's perfect. Well, what is a pity is to know that very often workers and employers organizations are not in the table of negotiations, because I'm sure that our agreements mention the importance of the inclusion of workers and employers organizations in this, at least the dialogue, the discussions about bilateral labor agreement, bilateral social or multilateral social security agreements. Okay, so something to take on in the future as an area to probably work more on. Okay, so have we heard, let me just go back to the list of panelists. Have we heard from Grace Navakusa? Is she with us? Can the organizers tell us more about if Grace was able to? Okay, so Grace has not been able to join us, so that's a real pity, because she was representing the Uganda employers, and she was going to mention to us about their involvement. Probably then I can go and just, we still have 5 minutes, so probably a question to Martin Wandara of Uganda. Can you tell us a little bit more about the negotiation of bilateral labor agreements with GCC countries? And if possible, since we do not have Ms. Grace Navakusa from the Uganda employers, if possible, tell us if they were supporting the whole process, and if the workers' employers representatives were also present and involved in the negotiations of these agreements. Can you give us a little bit more specificities about especially the negotiation phase of these agreements and the involvement of workers and employers organizations? Thank you very much, Martin, for telling us a little bit more about this. Martin, are you still with us? We do not seem to have Martin anymore. Let me see. Let me check.
I think his mic is on mute.
Okay, Martin, can you unmute your mic, please? And your video, please. Oh, okay, so the mic is not working. Okay, these are the technical challenges always with video conferences like this one. Okay, so I give the floor now. The floor is open to any of the panelists that would like to give closing remarks or just mentioning 2 or 3 issues that you think are important that were probably not mentioned during our panel. Do you think that there are issues that that should be probably shared with our participants? That any other? I don't see any more questions in the questions and answers list here before me. Okay, so no more questions and no more questions from our participants. Any other panelists that would like to say 1 or 2 issues that you think are important to be mentioned? No. Okay. So with that, I think we are. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, if I may just briefly. No, I just wanted to raise this in this session. We discussed both social security agreements and BLAs and bilateral labor agreements. I tend to see a number of people, colleagues and constituents who tend to confuse both instruments. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that these are two separate instruments that have specific objectives, and when we negotiate bilateral labor agreement, as was mentioned by Mr. Wandera, there are a number of issues that we need to keep in mind. And just a few years back, in 2015, we have done a mapping of over 144 bilateral labor agreements and MOUs, and we found out that only 30% of these agreements had actually some sort of provision in relation to social protection and access to health care, which is quite limited, and we know that almost no bilateral labor agreement have any provision with regard to long-term benefits like pension. So it's really key and I know this is challenging with some destination countries such as the GCC to also engage into the negotiation of separate social security agreements. But this is what we would very much recommend. Our instruments, international labor instruments, recommend the negotiation of separate social security agreements when you enter into bilateral labor agreements. So I think this is very important. And also not to forget that apart from the legal obstacles that migrants can face in relation to accessing social protection, there are a number of practical barriers that they can also face. Language barriers, lack of information, lack of representation, lack of access to justice and complaint mechanism. And definitely on all these issues, workers' organization, employers' organization have a key role to play. So I think this is also very, very important to keep in mind. Perhaps just just one example of, I'm not going to go into any detail of good practice in terms of BLA, but I just wanted to mention, I don't know if you're aware, but very recently Qatar adopted 3 new laws on which are dismantling actually the kafala system. And one of these laws is also creating a new minimum wage, which is non-discriminatory. So it's for all nationals and non-nationals. And in Qatar, as in many GCC countries, usually when they leave the country, the migrant workers get an end of service benefit. And now this end of service benefit will be calculated based on this new minimum wage. And I think this is laying the ground to quite a lot of hope also to perhaps having also, stronger, improved opportunities to also negotiate, social security agreements to extend social protection to migrant workers. So I just wanted to mention these few points. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you very much, Samia, for highlighting that. I think Mariano would like to also mention some issues before closing. Thank you.
Yes, I wanted to simply compliment Samia on what she was saying. It's important to go step by step and not to overextend, overreach, and be too ambitious. In paper, it can look very good when we talk about social security agreements that include all the branches of social security, but it is important that we get to actually enforce them and put them into practice. When I've seen agreements that are very, very ambitious and that they can never get utilized because countries don't agree on the clauses that are needed to actually enforce them, to put them into practice. So in the paper, the rights are there, but it is impossible to get them. So what I would recommend is to be ambitious, but not to overextend to the degree where you can't benefit from the agreement.
That you cannot really make sure that they are implemented correctly. You're right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Okay. No, great. That's important to highlight. Okay, we have yes. Yes, Miss Patricia Beringa Kieskes, who would like to speak. I do not have all the information to introduce you, but please go ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patricia from the DRC, from Congo, and I'm representing the employers organization. And what I actually wanted to add, because actually I'm working on it, I'm working at the moment regarding the bilateral labor agreements. Basically, I also think that there must be, or there could be an opportunity. We are taking presidency of the African Union next year, and I believe that all these type of remarks are extremely welcome. So I've tried to write as much as I could But I truly believe that it is also an opportunity, you see, because when you take the presidency, I would say that you are heard, your voice is heard a little bit more. And I think that is an opportunity for us to try to actually reinforce and have these agreements implemented, because I think that is the main problem, as was mentioned earlier, that there are lots of great, wonderful agreements written, but it's actually not implemented. So that is also something that could be pushed, because don't forget that we have this free trade, whatever agreement that's being signed, ratified and whatever. But I think it is a window of opportunity that we actually have to make it a main subject eventually through us, I would say, private sector, you see. So that's just what I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much for that, Patricia. And I just would like to mention that we have the joint labor migration program of the African Union, ILO, IOM, and UNECA that is working on, in fact, on these issues, and will most probably next year will be able to be implemented also in additional countries that were not included in this first phase. In fact, this conference is organized by one of the projects under the Joint Labor Migration Program, the Social Security extension of Social Security to migrant workers project, and is working under the umbrella, if you want, of the Joint Labor Migration Program, which, by the way, will be working in Central Africa and in South Africa and in other countries, in other sub-regions of the continent as of next year. So just for you to know that we will be most probably in touch on these issues. Now, I would like to give the floor to Salima. It seems that she wanted to give probably just some closing remarks. Thank you, Salima.
Oui, merci Madame Gloria. Donc, je voulais intervenir juste sur 2 points. Un premier point pour souligner que pour le Maroc, le système de sécurité sociale garantit une égalité de traitement. Donc, sans même avoir un accord de sécurité sociale, les travailleurs étrangers qui intègrent le secteur structuré qui sont déclarés à la Caisse nationale de sécurité sociale, ils bénéficient des mêmes prestations, bien sûr, et des mêmes droits et des mêmes obligations, bien sûr, les mêmes cotisations. Donc, c'est un premier point. Un deuxième point, c'est la nécessité de généraliser dans un premier temps la couverture sociale pour garantir, pour que les accords de sécurité sociale apportent leurs fruits. Par exemple, pour le Maroc, les accords de sécurité sociale concernaient juste les salariés. Les travailleurs indépendants au Maroc, donc cette couverture, c'est un chantier qui vient d'être commencé. Donc, les travailleurs non salariés ne sont pas intégrés dans les accords de sécurité sociale, mais le fruit n'apportera l'accord n'apportera son fruit qu'après avoir une couverture généralisée sur toute la population. Donc, cet accord, donc tout travailleur en mobilité, qu'il soit salarié ou indépendant, il bénéficie de la portabilité de ses droits et du maintien de ses droits en cas de mobilité d'un pays à l'autre. Je vous remercie.
Super. Thank you very, very much, Salima, for that the mentioning of those last points. Now, with this, I would like to close the floor. First of all, I would like to thank, of course, all of our panelists, Mr. Martin Wandera, Director of Labor, Employment and OSH from Uganda, Miss Salima Karbouche, Director of Social Protection from Morocco, Mr. Mariano Brenner, Regional Coordinator for the Americas from the International Social Security Association, and my good friend and colleague, Ms. Samia Kassia Aoul, Labor Migration Specialist and focal point for Africa's technical backstopping of the African continent, particularly in social security issues. So thank you very much to you all panelists for such a rich conversation. It was really, really interesting. We learned a lot, and I think we could stay here for at least 30 more minutes to continue discussing. But now we need to go into the closing session of this conference. So thank you very much to all of you participants for joining us, and a big applause to everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
A very big thank you to you, Gloria. I'm going to pick up the conversation from here. I see that our technical partners are starting to share their screen, and so I suspect that we might have a video or something. There we go. We might have a video to transition us into the closing remarks. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to invite that video, and then we'll commence with our closing remarks on the back of that. Thank you so much. Technical team, take it away.
Social security is a fundamental right recognized in international human rights instruments and international labor standards. However, migrants and their families face many challenges to access social security. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected migrant workers and triggered worsening inequalities. Now, more than ever, the importance of social protection for all is evident. The lack of social security coordination may prevent migrant workers from maintaining rights acquired in another state. That is why the International Labour Organization is working to support its tripartite constituents in Africa to extend social protection to migrant workers and their families in 3 selected regional economic communities. As part of the Joint Labor Migration Program, this project aimed to enhance decent work for migrant workers and to extend their access to social protection and portability of benefits. ILO has also carried out interventions at the continental level through technical support to the African Union Commission. In ECOWAS, the project aimed to improve the implementation of the ECOWAS General Convention on Social Security by member states. As a result, the ECOWAS Commission established the Committee of Experts on Social Security to monitor the effective implementation of the convention. In addition, the awareness campaign Rights Migrate To was developed to inform migrant workers of their social security rights. In SADC, the project's main objective was to strengthen capacity and policy instruments on portability of social security and other benefits. In EAC, the ILO supported the revision of the draft Council Directive on the coordination of social security benefits and helped its partners develop a roadmap towards the adoption of the directive. In all 3 regional economic communities supported by the project, progress has been achieved towards extending social protection to migrant workers. Such success has been directly linked to the commitment of member states, social partners, and other stakeholders in the regional economic communities. Moreover, the flexibility of development and financial partners allowed a timely response to the challenges linked to COVID-19 pandemic. Investing in and strengthening existing social security institutions will be instrumental in building back better a post-COVID-19 world where migrant workers fully enjoy their social security rights.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the team. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me back. My name is Nozipho Shabalala, and my job this afternoon is really just to now facilitate the closing remarks and those concluding comments that really allow us to begin to consolidate the key messages, the key insights, and all that we're going to be walking away with after 2 days of robust discussions, of really insightful contributions from our panelists yesterday and from our expert panelists today. So thank you very much for the opportunity to serve you as your moderator in that regard. I'm going to kick it right off by opening the floor and inviting Madame Patricia Giesges, who's just spoken in the previous session, who was also a prominent voice yesterday. She is, of course, the head of the social committee of the Fédération des Entreprises du Congo. And she comes in and closes off this conversation, as we can see on the screen, with 15 years of experience in various fields, spanning across the Netherlands, Belgium, South Africa, before she moved to the DRC to start her own business. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's my pleasure to open the floor to Madame Patricia and to hand over to her for her concluding and closing remarks. Madame, over to you.
Yes, hello, good afternoon again. I'm back again. Well, thank you very much, Nazi, for handing me the word. And I'm actually really delighted with the conversation that we've had for the past 2 days. And I really think that main thing came out of it. And if there's one that I can actually, that would actually want to further talk about, has to do with remittance, you know. And I think we haven't explored yet everything that remittance could actually bring to us. And being on different panels and being on different commissions here in the DRC, talking with the central bank too, I believe that there's an opportunity there. And it's been mentioned by one of the colleagues, I think it was yesterday and not today, that had been mentioned about the remittance. And I really think that remittance could also be a solution, basically, for portability of social protection for migrants. If that is a remark that I could leave in a closing remark, that would be this, that we really need to look further into this, because this is, I wouldn't say untouched, because some things have been happening here and there, but I truly believe that there's a huge solution there too, because I mean, money is always an issue and a problem. And I believe that it is really something we could work on it, you see, for real. So, and well, that's actually what I would say. And I would like to thank the colleagues for participating and for having me on board. Thank you very much. And thanks to you, Nosi, for this great moderation. And well, hope to you very soon, to see you all very soon and to hear from you very soon. Thank you.
Madame Patricia, thank you very much for those concise concluding remarks, bringing to the fore a very important issue that was raised even yesterday, and in particular around the complexity of our remittance channels, and the extent to which even COVID-19 began to expose how fragile and complex some of these channels are. And so again, one of the beauties of these conversations is that we don't always have to walk away with the perfect solutions, but we can walk away with more questions. And certainly the question that Madame Patricia is seeding with us is, what are we going to do to make sure that our remittance channels are an enablement of the portability of benefits that we've been talking about over the last 2 days. So a very big thank you to you, Madame, for that. It's my pleasure now, ladies and gentlemen, to open up the floor to a representative of the workers' organizations. It is a voice that I thoroughly enjoyed moderating yesterday with provocative and insightful contributions. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Joel Odigie back with us. He is, of course, the Deputy General Secretary of ITUC Africa, and in his capacity now will forward his concluding thoughts and closing remarks. Mr. Odigie, over to you, please, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Nozi, and good afternoon from this side of the continent. And let me say, okay, today is World Patient Safety Day. And so as African workers, we are commemorating this event for the obvious fact of what we are doing with respect to COVID-19 and how our health workers have been heroes and heroines of our fight to contain this global health crisis of the coronavirus. And so what you see is because I've been in the midst of a lot of persons where we are speaking to these issues. Of course, we are social distancing. Comrades, we want to thank the ILO. We want to thank the other partners that have made this training possible. We want to thank all the resource persons for their various contributions and the knowledge we have acquired in the last 2 days. On behalf of my General Secretary, Comrade Akosi Adu-Amankwa, we want to say that we look forward to more opportunities like this because, like we have come to find out, this process is very, very important, but it's still work in progress. But more importantly, to say that we want opportunity to be supported in concrete ways in areas of our work going forward. And we know that because I've seen quite a number of familiar faces that have been dogged and relentless in supporting us. Michelle Leighton, thank you. Comrade Gloria Fontes, thank you very much. Patricia and Victoire and others behind the scene, thank you all. The entire team, we want to say a very big thank you. And of course, we understand that this project this training has a link to the GLMP. And so we are also very much grateful to the GLMP team, the GLMP partners, the African Union as the main beneficiary, because we have seen a renewed African Union that is showing every day more commitment to the aspiration of the African people. To say indeed, the African people should remain at the front and center of our intervention. So we want to say very big thank you to the African Union, to the IOM, where we are grateful, we appreciate this, and we think we can do this much more. And one of the other things we want to say is, let's continue this process just like we are doing at the regional level. Because to the fact that we are able to achieve results is when we begin to see best practices happening. And when we begin to see best practices happening, then we know that we can begin to show these pictures to our people that, you know, this thing is not rocket science. It has been done elsewhere. It's been successful. It can be adopted with a consideration for local context. And so we would really want to strongly urge the ILO and others to continue this initiative and to consider the REX still at the fulcrum for driving this kind of initiative, just like we understand the African Union has recognized. More importantly, the point we made yesterday, this conversation has to consciously, at every point, have the voice of working men and women, particularly those that are migrants themselves. And it shouldn't be that they are on the menu. They should consciously be on the table where the discussion continue to go on. And for us, as organized labor, we are very much interested in the collaboration possibility with our business comrades, our business partners, to say how can we work together in a way that it can serve the interests of workers. Know that workers are not commodities, but they are people that make the wheel of progress and prosperity to turn. And if prosperity continues to turn, those who turn the wheel of prosperity are they get a fair share. And that kind of arrangement, we are open to have that discussion with our brothers and sisters on the other side of the class struggle in a way we can do this without confrontation, when as most times we can achieve that. Yes, we are open to that kind of discussion. But to say, lastly, the lessons we have learned from here, some of the things we have found out from here, we want to see them being processed henceforth. So in other words, the next step, the next possibility of a meeting should be the one that addresses the lessons we have learned from here, how we have put them into good use, and how we are able to better calibrate them. Once again, I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to the participants who have made it very, very, very successful, because without them, we couldn't have gotten this fine like we have had it. And then, Lucy, I also want to say thank you for helping to moderate this session in a very interesting manner, that everybody has got engaged and things are working. Yes, we do not hope that this will become the new normal. This is where we are today, and so we are having this kind of blending. But we are hopeful that very soon things will improve, and that time at all will begin to return to our lives as we once knew them to be, and hope that the interests of working men and women will be better served under a climate of post-COVID-19. Once again, I want to say thank you, comrades. Thank you for your opportunity, and thank you for the efforts so far that have been put into this process. Thank you. Thank you.
A very big thank you to you, Mr. Odigie, and absolute stand-up panel. And thank you for recognizing everyone comprehensively for being able to put together what has been an incredible experience for many. I'm going to close off by just reiterating a few points that I think have been important in the conversation. I picked up Mr. Odigie's starting comment, which is we need to make sure that we are being supported in concrete ways. And I suspect that some of that is about continuing to deepen and embed social dialogue into the very fabric of all that we do. And as we continue to reimagine the Africa that we want, it needs to be a continent where we are able to gift not only the individuals and families and communities, but entire labor forces the ability to be resilient against shock, the ability to absorb any crisis as we're facing now as global citizens. It is really about bringing to life the African free continental free trade area as we talk about a labor force that is able to pursue opportunities across the continent. How do we do that in a way that doesn't compromise the livelihoods of those that we rely on to make up the labor force? How do we do that with meaningful coverage and ensuring, of course, portability of benefits, and of course, the recognition and upholding of human rights as we pursue our very own opportunities within the continent? What I heard yesterday, and I've continued to hear today, is that a lot of this will be possible if we are able to make sure that we are able to have partnerships that work, that bring to life these aspirations, that we're able to leverage and tap into bilateral and multilateral arrangements, including also finding the courage for unilateral action, especially as it regards to migrants that are coming back into the country and making decisions and choices about how we want to ensure that they are benefiting as other nationals who have been working in the country for some time. We spoke a lot about yesterday of being mindful that as we look at our economies and our labor markets within those economies, that we don't do it through a narrow lens, and we have frank conversations about the small and medium-sized enterprises, and we don't make the mistake of leaving out the informal economy. The final thing I want to say is that a lot of these conversations also surface best practice. Our job now is to make sure that we identify where there is positive deviation, where things are going well, that we replicate and we scale, and we get one step closer to the Africa that we want, and one step closer to a decade of action that is taking us to 2030. Now, I have a message as I close off from Victoire, who we know has been a very, very big part of making this moment come alive. And she says, I would like to say that the ILO stands ready to continue to support. So maybe, Victoire, let's have your voice, if only for a minute, and really just give you an opportunity to re-emphasize those points, and then we can all say goodbye. So Victoire, if we can have your camera on, and if you would like to emphasize those points yourself, you're more than welcome. The floor is yours.
Do you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So Nozi, thank you so much for doing a great job moderating yesterday and as well as this closing session. I would also like to thank the moderators of previous panels, Mr. Bachabi and Madam Gloria. Just to reiterate that the ILO remains very committed to extending social protection to migrant workers, to working with both governments, workers, and employers to really make sure that these are not just words, but that we implement policies, strategies that seek to extend and also build inclusive social protection systems. Also to reiterate that for Africa, ILO has really heard the constituents in knowing that social protection is one of the key priorities. So we really stand ready to continue to work together with you. Thank you, Nozi. Take over.
Thank you very, very much, Victoria. I think it's so important to hear your voice there and re-emphasizing the ILO's continued support. Ladies and gentlemen, if I've got my time right, we are exactly 30 seconds from closing. So I want to thank each and every one of you for journeying with us over the last 2 days. And I'd like to challenge you to continue the conversation on our social media platforms. We continue to use the hashtag #RightsMigrate2. I've been tracking some of that conversation, and it's been really incredible to see you leaning into that conversation as well. So thank you for your participation, and we look forward to journeying with you further. From myself, Nozi Poshabalala, it's goodbye.